All right, so I think this is going to be a little bit of a change from what we've been hearing today. I am really trying to present in such a way that brings together presentations, thoughts, ideas from the first session that was on December 2nd, bringing the AgTech and organic community together, and then of course everything that was discussed today. So in thinking about incorporating tech into organic ideals in my mind, it's based on the ideal of sustainability. We want to farm in a way that is good for the people, planet, and can be maintained for generations. Sitting next to our ideals, we have the organic standards, and we heard some really spot on thoughts, messages just a little bit ago about the organic standards. And I think that we do often find ourselves in a bit of a struggle between the organic standards, which can feel rather rigid and stagnant. They don't keep up, they don't evolve as fast as we do in our progress. And our ideals, when we think of ideals, I think of the perfect standard, right? It's the excellence. So when we think about incorporating tech into organic ideals, I think it's important that we look at a method or a process for evaluating the compatibility of organic tech with organic principles. I also know that this is a goal of this entire project of the conference, really to serve as a bridge toward developing organic compliant ag tools. So I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about a method for evaluating compatibility of ag tech with organic principles and what makes for organic compliant ag tech. The proposition that I have for us today, really the focus of my talk, is to make sure that we are all aware of and starting with a central set of organic principles that have been developed through a really extensive stakeholder process many, many years ago, adopted nationally and internationally, and largely in many cases codified in the law and the regulations. I think that it is important that we stay tethered to our foundations as we evolve, that we use these principles to inform and help guide this really great conversation that we're having, and one that I truly believe we must sustain in an open and shared space. So first, to get us situated, we'll look at the organic stakeholder landscape and the private-public partnership feedback system that we use in the United States. We'll then look at what I call our organic guiding planets. Then we'll look at how organic compatibility decisions are currently made under the US organic regulations specific to inputs. And then finally, we'll end by looking at how organic stakeholders engage and inform a very evolving process in the name of continuous improvement, and how this process might help us as we're grappling with questions of compatibility, which of course include questions around equity and access. Okay, so here we have this organic stakeholder landscape. And I just want to say I'm fully aware that we have a very knowledgeable and sophisticated audience, so I don't want to belabor this slide, but I do want to put up a visual that represents the structure that we have for the public-private partnership in the US and the feedback loop between organic stakeholders and USDA. So starting at the top, I think there's something that might be cut off a little bit at least on my screen, but we have the law that informs the regulations. And just as a quick reminder, in the United States, USDA's National Organic Program, it regulates and enforces the term organic. I think we all know that. USDA serves, and I put emphasis on the word serves, the growing and evolving sector, and there is an established process by which USDA takes our feedback and responds to our questions and needs. And we have a lot of questions and needs. So the image on the left, here we are, the organic stakeholders. We've got producers, handlers, certifiers, consumers, trade associations, NGOs, retailers, scientists. We are the people, we are the organic stakeholders, and we can provide feedback directly to USDA, and or we can provide feedback to the National Organic Standards Board that you see over there on the right. The seats around the green table there, that's a 15-member citizens advisory committee that advises USDA on the development of the organic standards. The NOSB has a very unique function in that they are the gatekeepers of the national list. They are the ones that give the thumbs up or the thumbs down to what inputs can be used in organic production and handling. So inputs being fertilizers, pesticides, production aids. They have to go through, take those materials through a rigorous process, approve them, get put onto the national list, and that is how they become allowed in an organic system. They also have the function, the authority to make recommendations on the development of standards as well as broader organic policy issues. So keep that image in mind. The seats around the green table, we're going to come back around to NOSB in about 10 slides. Okay, so stay with me. I know you're all like, this is an AgTech conference. We just had a lot of inspirational speakers. Why are we getting a dry lesson on the law and regulations? I hear this a lot. I'm a regulatory person, but it's because there really are organic guiding planets. If we're asking ourselves if AgTech is compatible with organic, then I suggest we really need to be fully versed on what organic means as codified in the law and the regulations, because that can really help us as something that we can point to with teeth, and as adopted in foundational NOSB recommendations that might be a little lesser known. And so I really want to draw attention to some foundational NOSB recommendations. So we have the law, we have the regulations, and what I want to bring to everyone's attention and take a look at are two very important recommendations that were passed by NOSB in 2001 and 2004. In 2001, we have the principles of organic production and handling. And then in 2004, there's a recommendation called the compatibility with a system of sustainable agriculture and consistency with organic farming and handling. Those recommendations, they were worked on, they were developed by pioneers of organic through a stakeholder process. They were passed, they were adopted, they're incorporated into what we refer to as our NOSB Policy and Procedures Manual, which is housed on the USDA website. Okay, so just starting here first with the organic law and the regulations in terms of our organic guiding planets. Let's start with our definition. And I mean, gall darn it, I love this definition. If you're not aware of it, here it is. It's in the federal register. There it is. Organic production is a system that responds to site-specific conditions by integrating cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. This last sentence is definitely, really gets to the heart of organic agriculture. It really speaks to our organic ideals, but it is also missing, in terms of this definition, what's missing here is a social component. What we also don't see in this definition specifically is anything about inputs per se, simply because the practices before inputs concept is central to the law and the organic regulations. We know that there's plenty in the regulations about inputs, but in terms of really organic production defined the entire game plan, the emphasis is to resort to off-farm inputs as needed, when the cultural, biological, and mechanical methods don't do the trick. So it's NOSB's job to determine what inputs can and cannot be used. And there's very specific evaluation criteria spelled out in the law that they use. As a general rule, synthetic is prohibited except when allowed, and natural is allowed except when prohibited. But when it comes to inputs, NOSB does go through this very rigorous process to determine what's appropriate for organic. And per the law, they must determine compatibility with a system of agriculture or sustainable agriculture. That's right in the law. So this evaluation process, it's been developed for inputs, but not for AgTech. So yes, our focus is on inputs, but I think that what we have developed for inputs really can apply really very appropriately to our evaluation of AgTech as well. So looking at this in a slightly different way, just to make my point here, we have the key practices and procedures that are required to comply with the organic regulations here under practices and procedures on the left. And we have practices and procedures, of course, that aren't allowed because of the outcome of those practices and procedures. We have over on the right, the tools. So when we're thinking about the farmer's toolbox, I think about inputs, materials, but then I also think in that toolbox about the equipment and the technology. Now, unless ag tech is an input, we really don't have a formal process for evaluating compatibility with organic principles. But again, technology, like an input, it is a tool. So I truly believe that our foundations, our principles, the compatibility criteria that we have developed is actually quite appropriate, and in many cases can and should apply just the same. Now, down at the bottom, of course, in between practices and procedures and tools, I've just clearly stated, as we all know, we do have some forms of technology that are outright prohibited, specifically biotechnology, excluded methods or GMOs, and irradiation. And the circles that I have around the inputs and the technology, I have them overlapping because in many, many cases, technology is being applied to the inputs, it's being applied to the equipment. The lines get blurred between these two things. So again, I think of them all as the tools and how these tools are being used. Okay, so I think I have some animations on this one. So let's take a closer look here at the NOSB Foundation's Principles of Organic Production and Handling. I'm just going to put a couple examples, I think in this case, 5 examples up, because I've gone through this entire document and clearly there's many that they're so specific to inputs that it would be just a little odd, a little clunky to actually apply them to technology. But I just wanted to put these down in front of us so that we can see that these have been captured in a document that sits housed on the USDA website. These are the principles of organic production that I just want us to all be aware of and to continue to remind ourselves that these are our foundations. This is where we start, and we don't want to get too far away from these foundations. We have many, many new considerations, of course, going into the future, but these principles, you know, they really were developed with an eye for the future, thinking about what kinds of threats and opportunities the future might bring. So this first one really reflects the definition of organic production that we looked at in terms of enhancing biodiversity, biological cycles, soil biological activity. I love the second one. Organic systems strive to achieve agroecosystems that are ecologically, socially, and economically sustainable. I love this because, of course, when we moved into the federal realm of the regulations passed in 2002. For those of us that have been doing inspections and working in the private certification world before the adoption of the federal regulations, we did have social standards that we were inspecting to. Those social standards didn't make their way into the federal regulations, but we didn't lose them. We still have them in our principles. I like this third one because we talk about farmers and we don't always talk as much about processors and handlers. And so here is this principle about minimizing environmental degradation and consumption of non-renewable resources. So important. This is the one that we have here going back. People often wonder, you know, what was the thinking behind the prohibition on GMOs? Really looked at as a synthetic process designed to control nature at the molecular level with the potential for unseen consequences. So not compatible with the principles of organic agriculture. And then finally, this last one, an organic production system is designed to optimize soil biological activity, maintain long-term fertility, minimize soil erosion, maintain and enhance the genetic and biological diversity of the production system and its surroundings. So I think when we look at all of these, they all apply. These are great questions to be asking if we're thinking about a particular technology, if we're getting that hit in the gut, like this just isn't right, this just isn't compatible with organic. So equally so, now let's look at the specific compatibility with a system of sustainable agriculture. Now this one is interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, in the law itself, one of the criteria that the National Organic Standards Board must ask when they're reviewing inputs is it asks, is it compatible with a system of sustainable agriculture? And that is a little bit nebulous. What is a system of sustainable agriculture? What does that mean? So that prompted NOSB to put together a documentation with very, very specific questions, asking a series of questions to help them determine whether it's compatible, whether a particular input is compatible with the system of sustainable agriculture. So again, we have, does the use of the substance have a positive impact on biodiversity? Does the substance allow for an increase in the long-term viability of organic farm operations? That's a really important one. I'll bring this up again here in just a couple slides. Would the approval of the substance be consistent with international organic regulations, guidelines, including Codex? I think that one is a very important one. And I think there is where I would bring in the IFOAM, the 4 principles of organic agriculture, health, ecology, fairness, and care, as we're looking at these documents that are under the USDA. I think that many of us, and globally, very familiar and hold dearly those 4 principles of organic agriculture, health, ecology, fairness, and care. This question would bring in those particular principles, and I think fairness is one, characterized by equity, respect, justice, and stewardship of the shared world, both among people and in their relations to other living beings. Does the substance promote plant and animal health by enhancing the soil's physical, chemical, or biological properties? Does the substance satisfy expectations of organic consumers? And does the use of the substance encourage and enhance preventative techniques, including cultural and biological methods? I really looked at these documents because we don't get this kind of specificity, and it's broader than what we find in the organic regulations. And it is an important place, though, that we go to. And again, emphasizing this is tethered to a criteria in the law. This is something that the National Organic Standards Board does in fact look at very closely when they are reviewing the compatibility of an input. And again, I think it could apply so appropriately to questions that we might be grappling around the compatibility of AgTech. So this slide here, after I pulled out some of the most appropriate, the best of the best from the principles document, from the sustainability document, then I even narrowed it down a little bit further and put in some real specific questions. And when I was putting this together, I was putting all these pictures around. I've got a few of them off to the right here where, you look at a tractor and what kind of a reaction do you have? Well, let's get a little bit more sophisticated. Let's look at a more automated, more sophisticated tractor. And as we go down the list to the drones, to the robotics, what sort of a gut check do we get? At what point are we prompted to go in and say, yeah, let's pull out our compatibility chart and start asking these questions and say, does it promote or circumvent natural cycles? Does it promote and enhance biodiversity, biological cycles, and soil biological activity? And on, all of the little sticky notes that we were just looking at. What I also have been doing through the first conference on December 2nd, as well as through today, looking at these questions about AgTech, is it scale agnostic? Is it accessible to small, medium, and large operations? Does it promote equity and inclusion? Does it foster partnerships to produce free open source tools? Does it increase feasibility and profitability in an environmentally responsible way? So these are all questions, I can go up and look at the existing principles that we have, and I could say, well, does it allow for an increase in the long-term viability of organic farm operations? I could see that one capturing some of these questions that we're raising down below. So again, what I'm suggesting is that we have a place to go to. We have these principles. We really can collectively look to those principles and start applying them when we need to, when we're really coming up against some kind of a contention that we really need to work together to figure out, is this appropriate? Is this compatible for organic? Now I have some case studies that I'm going to quickly go through because we are running out of time. I've got 3 case studies that I wanted to bring up. They're real live examples. They actually happened, and some we're right in the middle of. This first one, I have a lot to say about it, but I don't have time. But just in terms of paper chain planting pots, this is an interesting one to bring up, or knit and paper chain systems, because it's it's a transplanting system. It was initially developed in Japan. It vastly decreases the amount of time it takes to transfer seedlings into the ground, facilitates transplanting of closely spaced crops such as onions and salad greens, herbs, and other crops. And it's also become the subject of from my perspective, well, maybe not so much now that I understand it better, but it's a bit of a strange controversy. Can paper pots, paper, be used in organic farming? It's been used by growers for a very long time. Newspaper and other recycled papers are already allowed as synthetic substances for use as mulch and as compost feedstock. But a question was raised as to whether paper pots are allowed since they're not on the national list. It's a simple but clever technology, and it's a great example of a technology that's both an input and a piece of physical equipment. But of course, the big deal is that this is equipment that's being incorporated into the soil. It's using adhesives. So it prompted the evaluation of an input, which of course put us on the path of a very rigorous NOSB review process, a couple of years worth, a rigorous stakeholder conversation utilizing national list and compatibility criteria. And something that came out of it, I think really digging into the compatibility criteria as well, is that while the petition was specific to paper chain pots, and there was a lot of emphasis on how important this tool is, particularly to small growers, there are other similar types of technologies that weren't a part of the petition that are important to commercial scale growers. So in the end, the conversation, in addition to looking at the composition and the impacts on the environment, there was quite a bit of discussion about scale neutrality and broadening the scope to include other paper-based planting aids such as seed tapes that are used by commercial scale production, so that we could get something onto the national list that would fit all scale of agriculture. So natural ammonia extract, again, running out of time, what I want to point out here is synthetic as a rule is prohibited. Natural as a rule is allowed. Well, along comes innovation, along comes technology. Now, foundational prohibition to organic farming is the use of synthetic ammonia fertilizers. But along comes technology, and along comes natural ammonia extract. And there's a lot of people really excited about this. I mean, how great, a natural form of ammonia extract. We can improve waste management, precision nutrient application. Well, this is one where, gut check, somebody raises their hand. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's always good. Just because it's a piece of equipment or a technology, it's a tool, doesn't mean it's good. So again, this really prompted this NOSB path where we all came together as stakeholders and said, we need to look at whether this is compatible with organic, because right now the standards as written allow for the use of natural ammonia extract. Long story short, the focus was really on the compatibility questions. That specific 2004 recommendation that was passed, we really had to dig into that and as a community come together and ask these hard questions. And the result, the NOSB vote that was passed, was to prohibit stripped and concentrated forms of ammonia extract. And we're awaiting the USDA NOP action and rulemaking on that recommendation, but based on the compatibility questions, it failed compatibility with organic. And this last one, I think I'll skip over it. I think we all know the issues here. This is certainly been going through the NOSB process for a very, very long time. NOP's position is that hydroponics is allowed, but there's an outstanding 2010 recommendation that would prohibit hydroponics and develop standards for terrestrial plants in containers and in greenhouses or container production. So this is an example where paper pots, a little bit of an input, a little bit of technology, ammonia extract, input that, really arrived to the scene because of the technology, the innovation behind it. This is one that is, truly a technology that you've got people on both sides of the fence that, line up those compatibility questions and somebody will have a different answer to each question. So, it points to the compatibility criteria. It's not perfect and it's going through this rigorous NOSB process. There's still a lot of contention and disagreement. So it's not a perfect process, but it is the process that we have. And so I think in closing and really full circle in coming around, I want to say that, in my In my opening slide, I said I think it's important that we stay tethered to our foundations as we evolve, and that we sustain this conversation and open in a shared space. And I truly believe that, looking at all of the amazing, wonderful presentations and all of the information that has been shared through today, as well as back on December 2nd, we do have a lot of great issues, complicated issues to work out. And we have a space that we can do that. We have our guiding organic planets, and we have a process that's been developed. We have a central process, a designated space to continue this conversation when and as needed. There can be lots of conversations and other ways to probably hone in, and maybe there's a point where we have a recommendation for guidance around compatibility for AgTech that we want to present to the NOSB and all come together and look at that together. NOSB continues to be the cornerstone of continuous improvement. It's the process that we created. The NOSB meets twice a year in a public forum to discuss and vote on national list items. But they also, and this language is actually right from a recent Federal Register notice, there's a proposed rule that's open right now around the development of organic standards. And in that document, it specifically states, and we've always known that NOSB discusses and votes on national list items, and they also make recommendations on standards development, but they also have the authority. They also are a group of voluntary citizens representing consumer public interest, producers, scientists, retailers, handlers, environmental resource conservationists, certifiers that are coming together now to really look at some of these broader policy issues, such as climate smart ag and creating a more resilient and equitable agricultural system. And that was right there in the Federal Register. And it was just so wonderful to see, because I think that these are the conversations that we really need to start having at the NOSB level to get beyond sometimes what can be just so input focused. So organic stakeholders, they come together, we work through the NOSB process to protect and strengthen the organic standards, to grow the organic sector so that we can survive, thrive, and really kind of back to the ideal farm into the future, maintain for generations and generations, something that's good for us, it's good for the planet. So I really appreciate all of the incredible information that was shared today. I think earlier, Ade, who is on the National Organic Standards Board, I would love to have a conversation with her because she constantly disrupts my worldview, which I really appreciate. But I would love to sit down and get her perspectives. I know as an NOSB member that's grappled with so many input issues, what that might look like at the NOSB level to put together compatibility criteria specifically to AgTech. So that would be fascinating. But finally, I just want to say again, thank you. It's been an honor. I've learned so much. I hope that I'm providing something here for everybody to think about. Hopefully I have something of a good idea. And I'll just end with this quote. All of agriculture, including its science, technology, and practice, must become more ethical as it seeks greater efficiency. So with that, thank you so much. That's it.